Hi, I'm Professor Williams, and welcome to Biology. This video is going to be particularly relevant to my Tarrant County College students. So I did post a First Things First welcome announcement on our online learning management system. It's co-branded as my.tccd. It's underlying through Blackboard is a supporting infrastructure, and at some point we are actually going to transition to Canvas as well. So this is going to be particularly relevant to my virtual students, and I just want to sum up in video form some of the most important things you guys need to know. Consider this kind of like the first day syllabus class that you typically have when we meet in person. So this is really only going to sum up ideas and important information for a lecture. It will not tackle lab. So expect weekly updates from me, weekly announcements, primarily on my.tccd. And any information found on other apps that we use, I'll let you know in the my.tccd announcement where you can find this extra additional information. So first things first, please read the syllabus. There's actually at the very bottom, one of the last pages, it has a calendar. And one important thing to note is you do have a separate lab and lecture syllabus. So please make sure you actually read both of them. And they each have their own separate calendar that shows you the most important dates as well as what we are covering each week. Lab is a little bit more dynamic and subject to change, but lecture is relatively straightforward. So again, lab will be covered in another video or another announcement, but this is the information you need to know for lecture. And some of it is also relevant for lab as well, and we will get to that as we approach the items relatively down further in the list. So the syllabus has a calendar, a list of when your most important assignments are due. And I would actually recommend that you either print out that part of the calendar or you make your own calendar. You can print one off and fill in the dates. We also have a course calendar too that you can see online as well. So one thing I need you, aside from the syllabus, to do is to actually complete the certification assignment. So that is going to be online on my.tccd. And it's really short. It's just 2 or 3 questions. And it's just important that you complete it so that I know that you're in an online class and you know how to access the online management system and you know how to complete assignments. It's also important for financial aid purposes. It's a state rule or law, has to do with your eligibility for grants. If you sign up for a class and never attend it, well, our state is going to want some of that grant money back. So you consider it kind of like your very first attendance, but also for Tarrant County College is I do have to take attendance on a weekly basis, at least once a week, and that applies to both lab and lecture, separate attendance grades. In order to qualify as attended, you have to have completed at least one assignment that was given to you that week for both lecture and lab. So they're independent attendance for them. As far as a certification assignment goes, there's actually only one certification assignment at the very beginning that you need to complete. And it applies to both lecture and lab. And so you can find this under lecture, PowerPoints, and other resources. It's part of the left-hand navigation menu. You'll have links to the syllabus there. At some point, a lab folder dedicated, a lecture folder. You can see there's an item for my grades as well. So primarily, all your content for lecture will be under that lecture, PowerPoints, and other resources folder. So that's where you'll have your test reviews, your actual test, which we'll talk about a little bit later, as well as well as PowerPoints and pre-recorded lectures. So these pre-recorded lectures are from a different semester. So generally, the due dates, the order of the assignments is the same, but the exact due dates, if there are any mentioned in the videos, will not be the exact same. Also, I recorded it as part of a 8-week class, and for you most likely are going to be taking it as part of a 16-week class. So if you see 2 chapters combined in one video, that's why. We actually originally covered them all on the same day. Oh, and also the other benefit is with pre-recorded lectures that you can fast forward or rewind. And all the lectures and all the PowerPoints are up there available for you right now. Lab, it's a little bit different and a little bit more complex, and you may see that content closer on a weekly basis. So the content definitely can still be modified before we get to that portion for both lecture and lab. But for lecture, expect basically what you see to be really close to finalized. So depending upon our specific class needs, there may be some additional content added or editing of an assignment. Your test, specifically for Tarrant County, there is a remote proctoring requirement for tests. So our tests, you guys are going to be using Proctorio. You actually will get a chance in lab to use this a lot more frequently and definitely first before you get to use it on your first major test. So I'll make sure I put up a help document for Proctorio to make sure you guys can sort of figure it out. It's not that tricky at all. You have to use the Chrome web browser and you have to have a webcam. And ID verification is set by default, so you will need a form of photo identification before you can take the test. And the tests are timed, but again, it's just something you have to do. It's not that complicated. You take your test like normally. It's just designed to make sure students are adhering by the regulations they agreed to. So the test description, for instance, will tell you that for your lecture, there are no outside notes of any kind for your lecture test. For lab, though, it's a little bit different. Lab may actually allow you to use your lab notebook as a reference, but nothing written outside of your lab notebook. But more information to come as we cover lab in a different video or announcement. When it comes to lecture, once again, I highly recommend that you do not attempt to take the test without first completing the test review. It's pretty straightforward. There was a bit of confusion in the past. It's really sort of to sum up all the content you're supposed to know and all of the chapters for before you take your test. The test review is meant to help prepare you to do well on the test. And I'm a big fan of the short answer / essay requirement, so that's just a bit of a heads up there. Another thing that I may occasionally do is send out in announcements something called a pro tip. So based off of what I've seen in previous semesters, I will provide a tip or may provide a tip for you guys on commonly missed items or points of confusion whenever it comes to the test. For instance, in I think test 4, there's this one question that almost every student misses every semester, despite the fact that in the virtual lecture, I go through 3 or 4 examples of that problem. But I think not every student takes advantage of those lectures. So in order to do well on lecture, of course, you definitely need to do the test reviews before you take your test. I'd also recommend at least 2 out of the 3 resources available for you, you may not need to use all 3. So you have pre-recorded lectures, you have lecture PowerPoints, and then you also have your textbook. Specifically, the textbook that I'll be using their lecture PowerPoints are going to be the Biology by Campbell and Reese. But for the most part, you don't need a current edition of that, or the OpenStax version of that should follow the relatively same format. You're not going to be quizzed or tested specifically from like review questions listed in the book. So you're not going to need a specific edition to do homework from or anything like that. So out of your 3 resources, your book, your lecture PowerPoints, and your pre-recorded lectures, I recommend at least 2 of those. So you can say read the book and go over the PowerPoints, or watch the pre-recorded lectures and read the book. Some combination of those 3 if you want to make the most out of your experience, if you want to learn the most from this course. Additionally, we do have access to a discussion board on my.tccd, as well as other apps. Microsoft Teams is available for us as a class. I'm going to try to set that up and work through that. I've been using it over the last year or more, communicating with my colleagues, especially during the pandemic. There are multiple channels dedicated to specific courses I'm teaching, the broader administration, my boss's bosses, different ways to communicate. You can video call, group video call, individual video call. You can direct message. You can post something for the whole group. You can work with files. You can set up assignments. There are all sorts of fun things you can use in Teams. However, the primary way I'm going to communicate and grade assignments is still going to be on my.tccd. Again, right now it's underlined by Blackboard. It will be Canvas in the future. I'll do announcements through my.tccd, and if there's additional information that you need to follow up with, I will tell you where you can find that. So for instance, later on in the semester, we'll do group independent research projects. And if I'm going to be communicating with specific groups through the Teams app, I'll let you know in that my.tccd announcement that I will communicate further through Teams. So Teams is secondary, primarily your grades, your lectures, your lab material. All of that will be found on my.tccd. And there may be other apps that we use, especially when it comes to lab, and we'll go into that as it becomes relevant. So I'm really excited to get to work with you all this semester. I know that was a lot of information, but to sum things up, the syllabus is your friend. There are a lot of different due dates for lecture and for lab, and we can be flexible as long as we communicate and there's demonstration of effort being put in, then we can work to be flexible. Primarily for lecture and lab this semester, you're going to expect to have, it's organized on a weekly basis. So you should expect that items will be available for you to complete around Monday, the beginning of the week, and should be completed around Sunday, the end of the week. Because teaching online can get overwhelming with all the notifications and all the assignments and all the emails, I do not check emails on Sundays. So yes, I know that it's the final day to submit it is the day that I will not regularly check my email. So I do encourage students to work on their content throughout the week and not to wait to an hour before it's due. However, since so many students still do that and wait to the last minute, there will be a little bit buffer. The assignments will be marked as late, but they will still be accepted for credit up until about 5 p.m. Monday. So it gives you an extra 17-ish or so hours to submit the assignments and to resolve any last minute issues. So you have in less than an extra day, but you do get some extra time to deal with last minute emergencies, especially when it comes to using this remote proctoring for lab. I know that there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. So I encourage you to sort of try to work through the lab content and those quizzes and getting up to date and prepared with how to use that proctoring. Work through that a little bit earlier in the week, especially during your first attempt at using it. And if you're not familiar with how to submit assignments, on my.tccd, there's actually this really cool key that most students might not quite be aware of. But when there's an assignment that functions as a Dropbox that you can upload your work to, there's going to be a particular symbol next to the link. And whenever it's something like a web video that you can click out of, there'll be something like a globe. If it's a test you can take, you'll expect something sort of like a sheet of paper with an X and check marks. So these symbols aren't just decorations. It helps let you know what kind of link or assignment or content is posted there. Can you interact with it? Can you upload to it? So that's just a little bit of a hint. Last semester, a few students were confused as to how to submit the assignments and when. So pay a little bit of attention to those symbols and keys next to the assignment name. And you can also click on them and click through them, and it should give you information on whether or not it expects an upload or whether or not it's just posted there for you to download the content. So again, if you have any questions, you are always free to contact me in Teams or through email. If you want, we can try the discussion board on my.tccd, but really that email and the Teams apps will probably be the quickest way to get a hold of me. So those are a lot of announcements. Buckle up. It's not as complicated as it seems, but it does require effort and planning to think through it. I will see you guys online, via chat, via Teams, or via lecture. See you next time.